He walked into court with a lawsuit. She walked in with bruises she was trying to hide. Marcus Torres told the court his ex-wife had destroyed his property and owed him $8,000. He was calm, polished, convincing. But the moment Judge Judy looked at Nadia Torres, really looked at her, the entire case shifted. Because what Marcus filed as a lawsuit was something far darker. And what Nadia had been carrying alone for 3 years was about to be seen for the very first time. There are cases that arrive in a courtroom looking like one thing and turn out to be something else entirely. On paper, the case of Torres versus Torres looked straightforward. A property dispute between two people who had ended a marriage. The plaintiff, Marcus Torres, was seeking $8,400 in damages. He claimed his ex-wife had taken his laptop, damaged his truck, and removed tools from the garage of the home they once shared when she left in October of the previous year. He had documentation. He had receipts. He had photographs of the truck with a cracked side mirror and a scuffed door panel. He had a typed list of items he said were missing from the garage. He had the calm, organized presentation of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. The defendant, Nadia Torres, was seeking nothing. She was not countersuing. She was not asking for anything at all. She had shown up because she had been summoned, and because when Marcus Torres told her to do something, even through a legal notice, 5 years of conditioning meant some part of her still came. That is the first thing you need to understand about this case before the doors of that courtroom open. The second thing you need to understand is that some people know how to perform reasonableness better than they know how to practice it. And Marcus Torres had spent years perfecting that performance. In every room he walked into, a workplace, a neighbor's doorstep, a courtroom, he was the version of himself that he had constructed with considerable care. The man who was patient, the man who kept his voice level, the man who, when things went wrong, had always been left with no good options. He wore this version of himself the way some people wear a good suit, comfortably, naturally, so well practiced that it no longer required effort. That is the thing about people who have learned to control others through fear. They are often extraordinarily good at presenting themselves to the outside world. The outside world sees the suit. The inside of the home is something different. The third thing you need to understand, and this is the thing that changes everything, is that Judge Judy noticed Nadia's wrist before Nadia had said a single word. Marcus Torres entered the courtroom the way men like Marcus always enter rooms they have prepared for. Pressed button-down shirt, dark slacks, hair neat, expression arranged into something that read as patient and vaguely sorrowful. The expression of a man who never wanted any of this, but who has been left with no choice. He greeted the bailiff. He set his folder of documents on the plaintiff's table with a quiet efficiency that communicated, "I am organized. I am reasonable. I have nothing to hide." He glanced toward the gallery and offered a small nod, not to anyone in particular, just to the room. The nod that says, "I am the kind of person who acknowledges spaces. I am aware of other people. I am not the problem here." Nadia Torres entered 3 steps behind him. She was 31 years old, and she looked older in the way that people look older when they have been tired for a very long time. She was dressed carefully, a long-sleeved blouse despite the warmth of the room, dark trousers, her hair pulled back from her face. She walked with the careful posture of someone who had learned, over years, to take up as little space as possible. She had spent 5 years making herself smaller in rooms Marcus occupied, adjusting her movements, her volume, her expressions to whatever he required in a given moment. That kind of learned smallness does not disappear the moment you leave. It becomes part of how you carry yourself, even in rooms where the person who required it is no longer watching. She did not look at Marcus when she entered. She looked at the floor, then at the bench, then at the bailiff. She set nothing on the defendant's table because she had brought nothing with her except a single envelope that she held against her side with one hand, pressed flat against her ribs like she was trying to keep it invisible. Judge Judy entered. She took her seat. She opened the file. She read for approximately 4 seconds. And then she looked up. She looked at Marcus first. A brief, reading look, the kind that catalogs what is visible on the surface and begins asking questions about what is not. Then she looked at Nadia. She held that look for a moment longer. Nadia's left sleeve had shifted slightly when she set the envelope on the table. Just slightly. Enough. Judge Judy did not say anything about it immediately. She looked back at the file, and she made a decision, a quiet, professional decision, about the order in which she was going to address what was in front of her. "We are here in the matter of Torres versus Torres," she said. "Mr. Torres, you are the plaintiff. You are suing your former wife, Miss Torres, for $8,400 in property damages. Is that correct?" Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Yes, Your Honor. I hate that it came to this, but I've been left with no other option." "We'll get to what options you had in a moment," Judge Judy said. She looked at Nadia. "Miss Torres, you are the defendant. You deny the claims." Nadia's voice was quiet, not weak, quiet in the particular way of someone who has learned to modulate their volume carefully. "Yes, Your Honor." "All right." Judge Judy set the file down. "Mr. Torres, let's hear your version." Marcus nodded. He was prepared for this. You could see the preparation in the way he opened his folder, not hurriedly, not nervously, but with the measured ease of a man who has rehearsed and knows his material. He explained that in October, Nadia had left the house without warning. He had come home from a work trip to find her gone, along with what he described as several $1,000s worth of his personal property. He said she had taken his laptop, a work computer, he emphasized, along with a set of power tools from the garage that he used for his contracting side business. He said his truck had been damaged, a detail he attributed to Nadia having reversed into a concrete post in the driveway in her haste to leave. He said he had tried to resolve this privately. He had reached out multiple times. She had not responded. He had been left, reluctantly, with no recourse but to pursue the matter through the court. He pushed his folder forward. Photographs, receipts, a typed itemized list. "She left in the middle of the night," he said, and there was something in the way he said it, a slight pause before and after, a weight placed on the phrase, that was designed to imply recklessness, instability, drama. The suggestion that a reasonable person does not leave in the middle of the night. That a reasonable person, if they wanted to leave, would do so during daylight hours, in an organized fashion, after a calm conversation. He was planting a seed. He was not the first person who had attempted to use the middle of the night against Nadia Torres. He had done it many times, privately. Now he was doing it in a room with cameras and a judge and a gallery full of strangers, and the technique was exactly the same. Judge Judy looked at the photographs. She looked at the itemized list. She set them down. "Miss Torres," she said, "I want to hear from you. But first I want to ask you something directly." Nadia looked up. "Your left sleeve," Judge Judy said. Her voice was not sharp. It was not theatrical. It was simply direct, in the way that a person is direct when they have decided that the most respectful thing they can do is not pretend they didn't see something. "Would you show me your wrist, please?" The courtroom went very still. Marcus shifted almost imperceptibly at the plaintiff's table. The smallest movement, a straightening of posture, a slight tightening of the jaw. Anyone looking at him in that moment would have had to be paying very close attention to notice it. Judge Judy was paying very close attention. Nadia looked at Judge Judy for a moment. Something passed across her face, not surprise, not embarrassment, but something more complicated. The expression of a person who has spent a long time hoping that someone would see, and who is not entirely sure what to do now that someone has. She had pulled those sleeves down that morning specifically so that no one would see. She had done it the same way she had done everything in those years. Automatically, without thinking, the reflex of someone who has learned that visible evidence of what happens inside a home is something to be concealed, managed, explained away. Slowly, she pulled back her left sleeve. The bruising ran from her wrist to partway up her forearm. Yellow and green at the outer edges, old enough to be fading, but still clearly visible. The kind of bruising that comes not from bumping a door frame or catching an edge on a counter, but from a grip, from fingers pressed hard into flesh and held there. Nobody in the courtroom spoke for a moment. Judge Judy looked at the bruising for several seconds. Then she looked at Nadia's face. "The other wrist," she said quietly. Nadia hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Then she pulled back her right sleeve. The right wrist was worse. The bruising was darker, more concentrated. There was a thin line of discoloration along the inside of the forearm that had the particular look of a mark left by something thin and hard-pressed with force. Judge Judy set her pen down. She looked at Marcus Torres. Marcus's expression had shifted. The sorrowful patience was still there, practiced, durable, but underneath it, something had tightened. He held himself very still in the way that people hold themselves still when they are recalibrating. when the conversation has moved somewhere they did not plan for and they are deciding how to redirect it. Mr. Torres, Judge Judy said, "We are going to revisit your lawsuit, but we are going to do something else first." She turned back to Nadia. "Miss Torres, when did you leave the house?" "October 14th, Nadia said. "At about 2 in the morning." "Why 2 in the morning?" A pause. The kind of pause that holds a great deal inside it. "Because that was the first time in 4 days that he was asleep, and I was sure I could get out." The gallery did not gasp. They went silent in a different way. The way a room goes silent when something lands in it that is too real for a theatrical reaction. "Tell me what happened," Judge Judy said. And Nadia told her. She did not tell it dramatically. She did not perform it. She spoke in the careful, measured way of someone who has told parts of this story before, to herself, in her own head, over and over, but has never told all of it, out loud, in a place where someone with authority was listening and where the account would be on record. There is a difference between the story you tell in your own mind and the story you tell out loud to a stranger in a position of power. The internal version has been revised so many times, questioned so many times, measured against what was real and what you convinced yourself wasn't, that by the time it comes out it often sounds uncertain even when it is completely true. Nadia had expected to sound uncertain. She was surprised, partway through, to find that she did not. She said she had married Marcus 6 years ago. She said the first year had been different. She said the changes came gradually, in the way that people who have studied this subject say they always come, slowly enough that each individual shift seemed explainable on its own. He was stressed at work. He was worried about money. She had said something that upset him. The argument had escalated more than it should have. These things happen. They would do better. She said it became harder to track when the pattern solidified, because by the time she could see the pattern clearly, she had already reorganized her entire life around managing it. She had stopped seeing certain friends because their presence seemed to agitate him. She had changed the way she dressed. She had stopped bringing up certain topics. She had learned which times of day were safer and which were not, which moods could be navigated and which could not, and how to read the particular quality of silence that preceded something she needed to be prepared for. She said the physical part had not been constant. There had been long stretches where nothing happened, stretches long enough that she would begin to believe it was over, that the version of Marcus she had married was still in there somewhere and had found his way back. And then something would happen, and she would understand that the stretches of quiet were not recovery. They were accumulation. She said October 12th had been one of the worst. She did not go into detail about what happened on October 12th. She said only that afterward, when Marcus had gone to sleep, she had sat in the bathroom for 2 hours looking at her arms and understanding that if she waited for a better moment, there might not be one. She said on October 14th, at 2 in the morning, when she was sure he was deeply asleep, she packed what she could carry in a single bag and she left. She did not take his laptop. She did not take his tools. She did not have time to damage his truck. She walked out of the house, got into her car that was parked on the street, and drove to her sister's apartment 40 minutes away. She said she had left so much behind. Her own clothes, her own books, photographs, a jewelry box that had belonged to her grandmother, 3 years of birthday cards from her mother stacked on the bedroom shelf, a pair of earrings she had been given when she finished school. She had left all of it because she could only carry one bag, and she needed to move quickly and quietly, and she was so frightened that she could barely think. Later she would grieve all of it. But in that moment, at 2 in the morning, moving through a house where every floorboard she had memorized for this exact purpose, the only thing that mattered was the door and what was on the other side of it. When she finished, the courtroom remained very quiet. Judge Judy had not taken her eyes off Nadia throughout. She had not written anything. She had simply listened. Now she turned to Marcus. Marcus had his hands flat on the table in front of him. His expression had settled into something he had clearly decided was the appropriate response to what had just been said, a kind of pained, patient sorrow. The look of a man who has heard these accusations before, who understands this is painful for everyone, and who wants the court to know that he does not take any of this personally. "Mr. Torres," Judge Judy said, "your response." Marcus took a breath. He said that he understood Nadia was in a difficult place emotionally. He said that the end of a marriage was painful for both people and that he had his own pain that he had been managing privately. He said that the version of their relationship that Nadia had described was not the version he recognized. He said that there had been arguments, every marriage had arguments, and that sometimes those arguments had been heated. But he wanted to be very clear that he had never, not once, put his hands on his wife in a way that was intended to harm her. He said the bruising she had shown the court could have come from anywhere. He said Nadia had always bruised easily. She had a condition, he believed, something to do with her circulation. He said he was sorry she felt the way she did, but that the facts of his lawsuit, the missing laptop, the missing tools, the damaged truck, those facts were real and documented, and he was there to address them. He said all of this smoothly, calmly, in a voice calibrated for credibility. He was, in this moment, fully deployed. Every word chosen, every pause placed. The full performance of the reasonable man who has been unfairly accused. Judge Judy watched him deliver every word. When he finished, she said, "The bruising on her wrists is in the pattern of a grip, a specific, directed grip. That does not come from a circulation condition." Marcus said, "Your Honor, with respect, I'm not a doctor." "No," Judge Judy said, "but I've been doing this for a long time, and I know what I'm looking at." She opened a different section of the file, paperwork that Nadia's attorney had submitted prior to the hearing. She picked up a specific document and reviewed it. "Ms. Torres, you submitted a medical record with your pre-hearing documents. Can you tell the court what that record contains?" Nadia reached for the envelope she had carried in and held against her side throughout. She opened it with hands that were not entirely steady. "It is a record from the urgent care clinic I went to on October 15th, she said. "The morning after I left. My sister made me go." "What does it document?" "Bruising on both wrists and forearms consistent with..." She read carefully from the document. "Consistent with restraint injury, a bruised rib on the left side, and bruising on my upper left arm and shoulder." The phrase restraint injury sat in the room for a moment. Judge Judy turned to Marcus. Marcus's smoothness had developed a crack. Not a large one, he was disciplined, but visible. His jaw had a new tension to it. His hands, still flat on the table, had pressed slightly harder against the surface. "This medical record was created the day after your ex-wife left," Judge Judy said. "It documents injuries that a medical professional assessed as consistent with physical restraint. Your explanation for the bruising on her wrists was a circulation condition. Would you like to revise that explanation in light of this record?" "I'd like to see the actual record before I respond to it," Marcus said. His voice had a new quality now. Still controlled, but with something harder underneath it. "Your attorney received copies of all pre-hearing submissions," Judge Judy said. "You have had this document for 11 days. Silence. Would you like to revise your explanation?" Marcus looked at his lawyer. His lawyer said nothing helpful. "No," Marcus said. "My explanation stands." Judge Judy looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked back at her file. "Ms. Torres, I want to ask you something. In the time between when you left and when you were served with this lawsuit, did you hear from Mr. Torres?" "Yes." "How many times?" Nadia's voice was careful. "Many times. By text, by phone, and he came to my sister's apartment twice." "What did he want?" "He wanted me to come back. And then when I said I wasn't going to, he said..." She stopped for a moment, started again. "He said if I didn't return his things, he would make sure I regretted it. And then about 3 weeks after that, I was served." "He told you he would make sure you regretted it," Judge Judy said. "And then he filed a lawsuit." "Yes." Judge Judy wrote something in her file. She wrote for longer than a single note would require. The room waited. When she looked up, she addressed Marcus directly. "Mr. Torres, I want you to understand something about what I am seeing in this case. You have filed a lawsuit claiming your ex-wife took a laptop, some tools, and damaged a truck. You have provided photographs of a truck with a cracked side mirror. I want to ask you something about that photograph." She picked it up. "This photograph shows a cracked mirror. When was this photograph taken?" A few days after she left. Can you tell me specifically what date? Marcus consulted his folder. October 19th. October 19th. 5 days after she left. Judge Judy set the photograph down. Ms. Torres left the house in the middle of the night with one bag. She drove directly to her sister's apartment 40 minutes away, where she remained until the next morning when she went to an urgent care clinic. Her sister's name and contact information are in your pre-hearing file. She looked at Marcus. Is it your testimony that your ex-wife, who left at 2 in the morning with one bag and drove directly to her sister's apartment 40 minutes away, also somehow had the time and the opportunity to back your truck into a concrete post on her way out? Marcus said, The driveway. The photograph of the driveway shows that your truck was parked on the right side of the garage, Judge Judy said. The post she allegedly struck is on the left side of the driveway. To reach that post while reversing, she would have had to execute a fairly deliberate maneuver. In the middle of the night, in a hurry, while carrying a bag, while trying not to wake you up. Marcus was quiet. The laptop, Judge Judy said. She picked up the next document. You have a receipt here for a laptop purchased 14 months ago. Is that the laptop you are claiming she took? Yes. Where did you primarily use this laptop? It was my work computer. I used it at home and on job sites. Was it insured? A slight hesitation. I'd have to check. Mr. Torres, I'm going to ask you to think very carefully about the next question I ask you before you answer it, because I want you to understand that I have been doing this for a very long time, and I have a very good ability to tell when someone is not being truthful with me. She paused. In the text messages you sent to your ex-wife before you filed this lawsuit, the ones in which you told her she would regret not returning your things, did you at any point threaten her in any way beyond the implication of the legal action you intended to take? Marcus said, I expressed frustration. That is not what I asked. Did you threaten her? A pause. I was upset, Marcus said. I had come home and she was gone. I was hurt. People say things when they're hurt. Did you threaten her? Judge Judy said again. Each word its own sentence. The crack in Marcus's composure widened. Just slightly. Just enough. I may have used language I wouldn't use today, he said. Ms. Torres, Judge Judy said, do you have those text messages? Nadia opened her envelope again. She removed a printed sheet of paper. The bailiff carried it to Judge Judy. Judge Judy read it. She read all of it. She did not read it quickly. When she finished, she set it down on the bench in front of her. She did not read any of the messages aloud. There are things that do not need to be performed for an audience, and the messages Marcus Torres had sent his ex-wife in the weeks after she fled their home were among them. What Judge Judy did was look at Marcus with an expression that contained no performance at all, no theatrical judgment, no dramatic pause designed for the camera, just the direct, clear look of someone who has seen what they needed to see and is now done pretending otherwise. Mr. Torres, she said, I am going to be very clear with you about what I believe happened here, and then I am going to tell you my ruling. Marcus sat very still. I believe your ex-wife left your home in the middle of the night because she was afraid for her safety. I believe she left with one bag and whatever she could carry because she could not risk waking you. I believe the medical record she submitted, documented the morning after she left at the insistence of her sister, accurately reflects injuries she sustained before she fled. I believe you did not file this lawsuit because you care about a laptop or a set of tools. I believe you filed this lawsuit because it was the most efficient tool available to you to force your ex-wife back into a space where you had legal standing to make demands of her, require her to respond to you, and place her in a room where she would have to face you again. The word tool landed in the room with weight, because that is exactly what it had been. Not a lawsuit. A tool, an extension of a pattern. The court as a continuation of the control. Marcus's jaw was working. He was constructing a response. He was searching for the version of himself that was patient and reasonable and misunderstood, trying to locate it quickly enough to deploy it. Judge Judy did not give him the space. Using the legal system to continue the harassment of a person you have already harmed is one of the most specific kinds of cruelty I see in this courtroom, she said. Because it takes something that is supposed to protect people and converts it into a weapon. It forces a person who has already been through something terrible to stand in a room with the person who caused it, defend herself against charges she did not deserve, and do all of that publicly, alone, without the protection she needed. She walked into this room, carrying that medical record in an envelope held against her side for the entire proceeding. That is not the behavior of someone who invented a story. That is the behavior of someone who has lived with the reality of not being believed for a very long time and who came here prepared to prove it. She looked at Nadia. Nadia was very still. Her eyes were bright. She was not crying. She had the quality of someone who had made a decision at some point not to cry in front of Marcus Torres ever again, but the brightness was there. "Ms. Torres, I want to speak directly to you for a moment before I give my ruling." Nadia looked at her. "You walked into this courtroom today because a lawsuit forced you to. You walked in carrying documentation of your own injuries in an envelope you kept against your side for the entire proceeding. You told your story quietly, without embellishment, without performance. And throughout this entire hearing, you have not once looked at the man across from you with anything other than a kind of exhausted stillness that I recognize." She paused. "I want you to hear me say this clearly, in this room, with a record. What happened to you was real. The injuries documented in that medical record are real. The fear that made you leave at 2 in the morning with one bag is real. And the decision you made to walk out of that house, as terrifying as it was, as much as you left behind, was the right decision." Nadia pressed her lips together. The brightness in her eyes intensified but did not spill. "Now," Judge Judy said, "I want to address the witness who submitted a statement to this court prior to the hearing. Ms. Torres, your neighbor, a woman named Patricia Delgado, submitted a written statement. I want to read a portion of it for the record." She picked up a document from the file. Ms. Delgado writes, "I lived next door to Marcus and Nadia Torres for 4 years. On multiple occasions, I heard raised voices from their home at night. On the evening of October 12th, I heard what I believed to be a significant physical altercation. I knocked on the door to check on Nadia the following morning and Marcus answered. He told me everything was fine. Nadia was not visible. I have seen Nadia with bruising on her arms on at least 3 separate occasions over the course of 2 years. Each time I asked her about it, she said she had hurt herself. I did not push further, and I have regretted that every day since she left." She set the statement down. Ms. Delgado's statement corroborates the timeline Ms. Torres described. It corroborates the date, October 12th, that Ms. Torres identified as the incident preceding her departure. It corroborates the pattern of visible injury over multiple years. It also reflects a reality that is common in these cases, that the people nearest to a situation often see what is happening and do not find the words or the moment to intervene. Ms. Delgado's regret is noted in the record. Her honesty in this statement matters. She looked at Marcus one final time. Marcus Torres was not performing anything anymore. The patience was gone. The sorrow was gone. The version of himself he had constructed and carried into this room had been taken apart, piece by piece, over the course of this hearing, and what remained was something smaller and harder and considerably less convincing. "My ruling," Judge Judy said. She straightened the papers in front of her. "The plaintiff's claims are dismissed in their entirety. Mr. Torres, you are awarded nothing. The truck damage you photographed 5 days after your wife's departure is not supported by the evidence as having been caused by her. The laptop and tools you claim she took are not supported by any credible evidence. What you have submitted are receipts proving ownership, not proof of removal. More significantly, the circumstances under which Ms. Torres left your home. In the middle of the night with one bag, fleeing injuries that were documented by a medical professional the following morning, make it implausible in the extreme that she paused to collect items and cause property damage on her way out." She paused. I am also referring the text messages entered into evidence today to the court's legal referral office. Several of the messages sent by Mr. Torres to Ms. Torres in the weeks following her departure contain language that, in my assessment, rises to the level of harassment and intimidation under the relevant statutes. That referral is now on record. Marcus's lawyer leaned toward him and said something quietly. Marcus did not respond. Ms. Torres, Judge Judy said, this court cannot undo what happened to you. It cannot give you back the things you left behind, your grandmother's jewelry box, your photographs, the birthday cards stacked on the shelf, the time you spent trying to manage something that was never going to get better on its own. It cannot do any of that. Her voice did not soften dramatically. It simply continued, steady, without performance. What it can do is say that what was brought into this room today, the attempt to use a legal filing as a mechanism of continued control, does not work here. That is what courts are for, not to be used as extensions of private cruelty, but to interrupt it. She picked up her gavel. The plaintiff's case is dismissed. The defendant is free to go. The gavel came down once, final. Marcus Torres gathered his folder slowly. He did not look at Nadia. He did not look at Judge Judy. He stood with the careful movements of a person who is very aware of being watched and who is managing, with significant effort, whatever it is he is feeling in this moment. His lawyer said something to him quietly. He nodded. They walked out. Nadia did not move immediately. She stood at the defendant's table with her hands at her sides, the medical record envelope still in one hand, and she looked at the bench where Judge Judy had been sitting. Judge Judy had already turned to her next file. The bailiff said something to Nadia, something quiet, not picked up by any recording equipment. Nadia nodded. She picked up her things. She turned toward the door. At the door, she paused for a moment. Not long. Just a breath. And then she walked out. There is a specific pattern that appears in domestic abuse cases that reach civil courts, and it has a name among the advocates and attorneys who work in this field. It is called litigation abuse, or sometimes legal abuse. The terminology varies. The pattern does not. It works like this. A person who has been using control as the primary mechanism of a relationship finds that the relationship has been severed. The direct methods of control, proximity, access, the particular geography of shared space, are no longer available, so they locate the next available mechanism. And the legal system, with its requirement that defendants respond, appear, and submit to process, is one of the most effective mechanisms available. A lawsuit does not require that the claims be legitimate to accomplish its purpose. The purpose is not to win in court. The purpose is to force contact. The purpose is to place the other person in a position of vulnerability, of having to respond, of having to appear, of having to stand in a room and justify themselves to a stranger. The purpose is to communicate, as clearly as any threat ever communicated, that leaving does not mean free, that the reach is long, that there is no door you can close that cannot be opened again with the right filing. Nadia Torres had understood this. She had understood it from the moment she was served, standing in her sister's kitchen holding a legal notice that claimed she owed her ex-husband money for a cracked truck mirror and some missing tools. She had understood it the way you understand something you have been trained over years to recognize in your body before your mind catches up. The sick drop of recognition. The exhausted thought, of course he found a way. She had showed up anyway, because when you have spent years being told that your perception of reality cannot be trusted, showing up and letting the evidence speak is one of the few things that feels like solid ground. She had come with her medical record. She had come with the printed text messages. She had come with the knowledge that her neighbor had agreed to submit a statement. She had prepared the way survivors prepare, quietly, methodically, without anyone else knowing how much work it had taken, because she had learned long ago that when your word alone is not considered sufficient, you had better come with everything else. In the months after the hearing, Nadia Torres obtained a protective order against Marcus Torres. She worked with a domestic violence advocacy organization in her city to navigate the civil protection process. She returned to work full-time. She moved out of her sister's apartment and into a place of her own, small, with a deadbolt she had installed herself, on a street where she did not recognize any of the neighbors yet, which felt, for the first time in years, like safety rather than isolation. She did not speak publicly about the case for a long time. When she eventually did, in a brief conversation with an advocate who asked her what the hearing had meant to her, she said she had thought many times about what Judge Judy had said, that leaving at 2 in the morning with one bag had been the right decision. She said she had replayed that sentence many times in the months that followed. She said, "For a very long time I felt ashamed of how I left. Like I had done something wrong. Like I should have handled it more cleanly, said something, done it in daylight, done it with more dignity somehow. Like if I had been a different kind of person, I would have managed it better." And someone just saying to me, in a room with a record out loud, that it was the right thing. Not just that they believed me, but that the thing I had been ashamed of was actually correct. That I had made the right call. I hadn't heard that before. Not like that. Marcus Torres filed no further legal action against Nadia Torres in the months following the hearing. The referral submitted by the court was reviewed by the appropriate office. The outcome of that review is part of an official record and is Nadia Torres's information to share or not as she chooses. What is not private, what is on record, in the plainest possible sense, is what happened in that courtroom. A man filed a lawsuit designed to function as a continuation of something that had been happening for years behind closed doors. A judge noticed a bruise. A woman who had not been fully believed for a very long time was believed, clearly, directly, and on record. People sometimes ask, those who work in advocacy, in crisis counseling, in legal aid offices, what the turning point looks like when someone finally decides to leave, when someone finally decides to speak. They ask because they want to understand the mechanism. They want to know what unlocks it so they can create more of those conditions for more people. It is a reasonable question, and it deserves a serious answer. The answer is that there is rarely a single turning point. There is rarely one moment that functions like a light switch, before which nothing was clear, after which everything was. What there is instead is an accumulation of moments, small ones mostly. A comment from a neighbor who asks if you are all right. A phone call from a sister who says you sound different. A morning when you look in a mirror and do not recognize the person looking back. Not because anything dramatic has happened, but because the gradual erasure of yourself over years has finally produced a version of you that is so far from the original that even you cannot locate it anymore. And then sometimes, there is a room. A specific room on a specific day with a specific person who looks at you and does not look away, who does not accept the explanation about circulation conditions, who does not allow the sleeve to stay down, who asks, in a voice with no performance in it, to see what has been covered up. That room and that question are not small things. They are not small even when they happen quietly. They are not small even when nobody else in the gallery fully understands what they have just witnessed. Nadia Torres understood what she had just witnessed. She had walked into that courtroom that morning believing, in the part of herself that 5 years of being disbelieved had reinforced, that she would walk out with a judgment against her. That Marcus would be calm and credible and organized, which he was, and that she would be seen as the unstable, ungrateful, accusatory ex-wife, which she feared she was. She had brought the medical record because she was prepared to fight. But she had not entirely believed she was going to win. She had not known that what would change everything was a sleeve that slipped on a table when she was trying to set down an envelope carefully, a fraction of an inch of exposed wrist. A person sitting behind a bench who had done this long enough to know what a grip mark looked like and who had decided, in 4 seconds, that the file she was holding was not the real case. That is the thing that stays with you thinking about this story. Not the verdict, though the verdict matters. Not the referral, though the referral matters. But the 4 seconds. The moment of decision to see something and say so, rather than allow the proceedings to continue on their original track. 4 seconds that changed the direction of the entire hearing. That changed what was on the record. That changed what Nadia Torres would carry out of that room with her. There is a kind of courage that does not look like courage from the outside. It does not raise its voice. It does not arrive with drama or declaration. It shows up in a long-sleeved blouse, carrying a medical record in an envelope pressed to its ribs, and it stands at a defendant's table, and when someone asks to see its wrists, it pulls back its sleeve. That is a different kind of courage than most people imagine when they think of the word. But it is the kind that changes things. And sometimes, in a room with a record, with a gavel, with someone who knows what they are looking at, it is enough.